We're digging into our second session in our new Bible study series, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a study of the book of Judges. And in order to understand what's going on in Judges chapter 3, as we actually get to meet some of these characters, we need to take a brief detour into particle physics. Join us for this conversation. Right, okay, so forgive me for the detour, but one of the things scientists discovered in the 20th century is that light is weird. Light, the source of radiation all around us that illuminates everything we can see, and also includes all sorts of wavelengths that we can't see. Light sometimes acts like a particle, like a little tiny thing that can ping off of other things, and sometimes acts like a wave. And some scientists say, well, when you do this experiment, it acts like a particle. And other scientists say, well, I've got other evidence that says that light acts like a wave. And you end up with two things that sound contradictory. And you end up with scientists saying, maybe we need both somehow, both to be true at the same time. It sounds weird. And yeah, scientists embrace that this sounds weird, that light acts like a particle sometimes and a wave at other times, or somehow is both at the same time. And that's hard for scientists, who are usually the kind of people who like to say it's either this or this. It's black or it's white, it's true or it's false, and are not really comfortable with both at the same time kind of responses. That's important because it turns out the Bible, a lot more often than we'd care to admit, talks like that of, well, on the one hand this, but on the other hand this is true at the same time. If we've grown up thinking the Bible is just an answer book where I bring my question and there's one place I find the answer in the Bible, I should be prepared to be disappointed. Especially when it comes to questions like big questions like, how are God's people supposed to live? Should we have a king or no king? This is a really important question in ancient Israel, and it turns out there's not just one answer. You have some strands of the Hebrew Bible that are real clear. King's a great idea, and others are like, a king will be terrible. And it's into that conversation that the whole book of Judges fits. The book of Judges is sometimes called a part of Deuteronomic history. In other words, it's a particular way of reading ancient Israel's history in light of the blessings and curses from the book of Deuteronomy. When we're faithful, things will go well. When we're not faithful, things will go bad. When we keep God's covenant, we will prosper. When we don't keep God's covenant, foreign nations will come and whomp on us, and that's its lens through which it makes sense of history. The book of Judges, as we began to introduce last time, watches this pattern unfold of the people are left to their own devices, and what do you know, they fall into sin, and foreign nations come and conquer them, or pirate their belongings, or plunder them. They cry out to God and say, we're going to turn a new leaf, and its cycle starts all over again. The book of Judges is going to eventually come to the conclusion, well, the real problem was we didn't have a good, strong leader who would help point us in the right direction. The book of Judges comes to this conclusion at the end of what we really needed was a king who would help keep us on track. In fact, the final sentence, spoiler alert, of the book of Judges is there was no king in Israel and everybody did what seemed right in their own eyes. And the book of Judges says that's the problem. Now, to be sure, there are other voices in the Hebrew Bible that will say things like, a king is a bad idea. If we end up with a king, what's to stop them from becoming a new tyrant like Pharaoh of Egypt that we left all that time ago? And that's a fair point too. Both of those exist in the Bible, and pretending that there's only one or the other is just a blatant misreading of the scriptures. Once you know that, you can delve into one book or another, one passage or another, and make better sense of what's this author trying to say, what important points might they raise, and where do I need to hear a counterpoint? Sometimes light is like a particle, sometimes light is like a wave, sometimes both at the same time. So as we're introduced to characters in this next chapter of Judges, in Judges 3, like Othniel and Ehud, we'll see that they're strong military leaders and they have clever plans, almost like an action movie in the story of Ehud, to defeat enemies who've come and plundered them. But you can also see these guys aren't necessarily shown as people of deep character or wisdom. They're just the leaders of the moment who banded together a militia to help go fight off an invading army. That's a useful skill, but not the whole cornerstone of what you build a society or a culture around. In other words, you can begin to see sometimes we need strong leaders, but you could also see the counterpoint waiting to be spoken. But you also need somebody even more than just a warlord to rule your country or rule your people. In other words, we're going to need to hear not just the heroic stories of Othniel or Ehud, but we're also going to need to face that to be God's people requires more than just a strong authoritarian leader. We need people with character leading us, to shape good character in us. That's where our conversation is going to pick up, and we hope you'll join us for these in-person conversations, 1 o'clock Thursdays here at Community of Christ, as we continue our new study, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. See you then.